Hello, this is your 2010-2011 Winter Weather Outlook presented by the Ohio Weather Network. Let's take a look at some of our season highlights that we're expecting to see here this winter weather season. To start, we think it's going to be pretty warm through mid-November. That'll be followed by some thunderstorms along a strong cold front about the middle of the month. Then we'll turn colder and will remain colder for the rest of the season. We think we're going to have a rather dry December, and when we move into late December and through February, that will bring most of our snow. This is typical for Ohio, as winter doesn't actually start until late December anyhow, but we think most of our snow will fall anywhere between late December through February. After that, we're expecting a warm up in March, particularly early March, and this will likely bring an early spring and possibly some flooding, especially if we get a late season snowstorm followed by a warm rainy period. That could definitely bring some flooding to places like east central Ohio and southeastern Ohio, where many of the river and stream basins are already shallow. That could definitely bring some flooding to those areas, so have to keep an eye on that closely there. Okay, let's move on to the overall upper air pattern we're expecting this season, and we're expecting the polar jet stream to sink pretty far south, definitely south of Ohio. And we can see as the wind barbs move along that upper air jet, we're going to be in for a cool pattern here. This is going to allow some cool air to sink out of the Arctic and well south of Ohio, keeping us rather cool. So the temperature outlook for the region this season, well, we're going to keep this pretty easy. We're going to color the entire map blue. We think we're going to be cooler than average overall, at least by a few degrees. Of course, southern Ohio will be slightly warmer than northern Ohio, as typically is the case, especially along the Ohio River. Some of these big low pressure systems that move up will get in that southerly flow. A lot of that warmer weather will move just along the river as well. So you can expect right along the river to be a little bit warmer than surrounding areas. Moving right along to the precipitation outlook. And we're going to go a little bit against what some of the other forecasts are calling for. We think northern Ohio, specifically, the northern half of Ohio, will be slightly drier than average. Now, for the snowbelt regions of northeast Ohio, it's going to be a tough call for you guys. If we get a lot of lake effect, you guys could be at average or slightly above average on precipitation, so we'll have to keep an eye on that closely. For the southern half of Ohio, points from Interstate 70 southward, I think you're going to stay drier than average. You guys have been drier than average most of the season this year, so I think that's going to continue. And off to the eastern and northeastern United States, they are going to be wetter than average. Alright, first thing I want to take a look at here is our Alberta Clipper. A little bit about the Alberta Clipper. It originates in the Alberta, Canada region and moves southeastward across the northern United States and Great Lakes region. Typically brings us a few inches of snow, and it's a pretty fast-moving system, so they usually only last about a day. A lot of them will move through in an overnight period as well, so anywhere from about 8 to 16 hours these systems affect us. Overall, we typically see about 3 tracks. There's this northern track, we have a median track, and a southern track. The system's typically like the southern 2 tracks. The northern track isn't taken very often, just depending on the overall air pattern now. And we'll put that into motion and see how these systems move. And typically they bring us, again, about 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. And then behind it, there is the potential for lake effect snowfall as the winds turn to a more northwesterly flow. So the snow belt can, again, see an additional 1 to 3 inches in lake effect snowfall behind this system. Another type of system we see typically in the wintertime are the panhandle hooks. Originate in the central United States around the Oklahoma and Texas panhandle. They typically move east-southeastward and then take a turn towards the northeast. They typically like to follow the upper air pattern that's in place at the time as well. We have 3 tracks here, and notice that these tracks really aren't spaced that far apart. A slight change in the track has major changes on who sees what type of weather. We have our eastern track, which typically will track to the eastern slopes of the Appalachians over the DC metro area and then up the coast. We can also see storm tracks right up the Appalachian Mountains, and depending on the upper air pattern, we can also see that storm track on the western slope of the Appalachian Mountains. So we'll put that into motion as well. And again, this slight change in storm track can have major implications on what type of weather we see here. Typically, if we take the eastern track or the track over the mountains, this is the setup we'll see. If we take the western track, we're going to push a lot of this further north actually. But otherwise, in general, southern Ohio, depending on the temperatures, we'll see mainly rain. If it's a little bit cooler, we could see a mix in there. Otherwise, for central Ohio, we usually have this area of mixed precipitation or even ice. Freezing rain or sleet could also fall, causing some icy conditions. And then for northern Ohio, we'll see mainly snow. And again, depending on the track, we could see variances in this pattern, and along with the temperature as well. If more warm air is able to evac northward into Ohio ahead of the system, this could all change completely. We could see a real wintry mix through all of Ohio change to all snow, where we have a layer of ice followed by a layer of snow. So it's very, very important to keep an eye on these storm tracks. And the first one we get of the season will be very important because that could set the trend for future panhandle hooks. The only other storm system we're not going to talk about right now are the nor'easters. They typically like to track up the east coast or just offshore. For the most part, off of them, we primarily see wraparound moisture in the form of snow and also some lake effect snow. And we actually just saw this here recently, and that's typically what we see. If they track further west, we can see more snow, but overall, they don't typically have a huge impact on us unless they track well far inland than usual. They typically like to follow the upper air pattern that we saw just a moment ago, and I think that's going to keep our precipitation from the nor'easters limited. And again, behind these systems, you can see some lake effect. Alright, so to wrap it up here, the summary for the season. Overall, cooler than average across Ohio. Against southern Ohio, a little bit warmer than northern Ohio. Northern Ohio is going to be slightly below average on precipitation, but southern Ohio will be well below average, I think, on precipitation. They're going to stay pretty dry than normal. I think we're going to see an average number of Alberta clippers. We usually see about a handful of these, anywhere from 3 to 6. I think that's going to be about normal for this time of year. Again, general snowfall associated with those, about 1 to 3 inches with some possible lake effects setting up behind them. I think we're going to see a couple of panhandle hooks, maybe anywhere from 2 to 4 this year. The track, I think, is going to be primarily further east due to the upper air pattern sinking pretty far south. And we could see a couple of strong systems, and that includes the nor'easters as well. I don't think the nor'easters are going to affect us that much, but if they are pretty strong, we can see some decent snow off of them in the wraparound moisture. Again, we could see some additional lake effect snow behind these systems if that northerly wind is able to set up and persist for a long period of time, and if the lake remains unfrozen for most of the season. And that means the snow belt could average their precipitation either at or slightly above the average, so we'll have to keep an eye on that closely. That's going to do it for the winter weather outlook. For the latest weather information, you can visit our website, ohioweathernetwork.webs.com.